Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine Taylor-Klaus and Diane Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults.
Hi everyone, Elaine and Diane here, and we know that you want your complex kids to grow up to be happy and independent, and yet you're not always sure how or when to help with that.
In this podcast, we'll encourage you to collaborate with all kinds of complex kids and support them in navigating life and learning.
And we'll interview leading experts from around the world, as well as parents in our own community, talking about how training for parents actually helps these complex kids.
We'll talk about the issues we hear parents struggling with all the time and how a coach approach can support and empower your amazing young people.
We won't tell you what to do. We're going to help you figure out how. So let's move on to the next conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. I am really excited to have a stimulating conversation today. My guests are Jaya Ramesh and Priya Saaral. Did I pronounce those correctly? Well enough? And they are doing something really, really important. They are writing a book called Parenting at the Intersections, Raising Neurodivergent Children of Color. When they reached out to me, I don't even know how long ago it was now, I was so excited to say, yes, let's have this conversation and let's keep having this conversation because in our community, it's so important. And there's so much conversation in the world about about equity and inclusion. And you know, we have been big advocates for neurodiversity, equity, and inclusion. So I love the work that you're about and the intersectionality of all of it. So important. So welcome. Thank you for being here. I do encourage everybody, our listeners, to check out the show notes, read their bios, get an advance notice of the book when the book comes out. I believe that's what we'll be able to do. But we'll talk about that. Let's start by introducing yourselves from your lens. Like, how did you come to be writing a book on intersectionality, neurodiversity, and children of color? Like, how'd this happen?
Do you want to start, Priya?
Sure, yeah. I think a little sort of background before, like in my timeline, if I could say. I think one of the earliest sort of memories I have of the kind of work I really wanted to do was, back at thinking about the diary entry from my 12-year-old self that said, I really want to work with kids when I grow up, and that's something I want to do. And somehow my life kind of took me on a different path initially, and I found my way in a very circuitous manner to becoming a social worker and then a child therapist, working with young children, and I think quickly working with kids with varied needs, many of them neurodivergent. I understood and really felt deeply that this work is incomplete without working with parents and supporting parents in the most meaningful way to help them feel to build their confidence and their skills and their regulation to be able to care for their children well, and of course all parents want to love their children well and want to want that support so deeply. And I think being a parent at that moment myself and working with through many of the challenges I did with my neurodivergent kid and myself as a late neurodivergent, well, I have always been neurodivergent, but late diagnosed, right? I think that was really validating and also has kind of brought me to this work. And I know Jaya and I, we met at a context in a time where our first meeting, Jaya, was really around parent support, and we didn't even name it that way, right? I think I just felt so much the safety of that Jaya brought, and I remember crying about a really deep incident that was so impactful to my son and I, and it was such a moment of relief and such an sort of, I think, important juncture in our friendship and relationship, and I love that kind of materialized to a moment where we could write a book about supporting other parents in these
So this is something that on some level started for you as a child, and then as an adult, you came to sort of bring a lot of pieces together to bring this. Jaya, what about you?
I love that connection you're making, Priya. First of all, thank you so much for having us today.
It's really a pleasure
excited to be here and to talk to you, Elaine. So my journey to this book in this moment, I think as a sort of classically ADHD person, I've had many iterations in my professional career.
Yeah.
And so, I started off working as an environmental campaigner for Greenpeace, and then moved into teaching at a community college, and then found my way into mental health counseling. And around that same time, my oldest kiddo got diagnosed as neurodivergent, both with ADHD as well as giftedness, which I know sometimes people don't see as neurodivergence, but it is.
Oh, for sure. And often coexisting,
right? The twice exceptional. Yeah. So I think that started that personal, started my journey into this area. Mm-hmm. And I remember at that time just really looking for resources to support our family, and noticing that, there was something missing in those books for me. And at that time in my own development, I didn't have the language to name what was missing.
Yeah.
I felt sort of this resistance in me about like, this advice or these tactics don't really sit well for me, but I couldn't understand why. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think I've come to understand that why it didn't fit was that there was a presumed uniformity in experience. And it didn't really capture the experience of being a family of color, having an immigrant background, just all the different layers that when we picked up these resources, we were like, this doesn't quite fit, right? Yeah. And then in my own private practice, just the work there's this thing in mental health where the clients you draw, the people who come to you, there's something about like, they find you, but you also need them in a way, right? Like, it's like a co-healing that's happening. And so a lot of the folks that were coming were couples and, who were parents of kids with neurodivergent kids, and how that was impacting their marriage.
Yeah.
And also a lot of neurodivergent adults. And so when this opportunity presented to write this book, it just felt like a really sort of natural conclusion of all of this process and learning and growth to put this out in the world.
So what strikes me about both of what I'm hearing from each of you in different ways, and it's almost like a parallel to the experience Diane and I had when we started Impact, was this recognition that there's this need, this gaping void of service. And that what's available is close but not quite there, and it's not really filling this void. And for us, it was anything around parenting, because in those days that wasn't there, and then this coaching framework versus the therapeutic model. And for you, it's about, does this speak to my culture? Does this speak to my community, to me and my community? And the more work that's done in this space, the more we see the needs, and we begin to fill more and more and more of these cracks and crevices of gaps in services and support for families. The other thing that I'm hearing both of you speaking to is the adult experience, right? Whether it's as an adult with neurodivergence ourselves, or as a parent or couple dealing with neurodivergent kids, that, nothing prepared us for this.
That's right.
As adults. And I think that you two speak to that very clearly. And so you've both alluded to the fact that somebody came to you and said, let's write this book, right? So can you speak to that a little bit before we move into what do parents need to know? But start with that.
Yeah.
Jaya, you go first.
You want me to go? Sure. So a good friend of ours who used to be in the publishing industry connected us with an agent who has an autistic child. And, is a child of color, and said, what, I am seeing all these parenting books out there. There's really this gap. We need someone to write it. And we got connected to him. And, I think both went through our sort of imposter syndrome phase. And maybe sometimes we're still in it. I don't know, Priya.
Probably. Most of us are.
Most of us are, right?
Yeah.
So hey, we are the ones, like, should we write it? Like, what do we have to say? And, but that sort of kicked off that process. And, I think from the very beginning, we were very clear about wanting to write this book in a very particular way and decenter ourselves as experts.
So what do you mean, Priya? Will you pick that up? Write it in a certain way. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think as parents of color, as in raising children who are neurodivergent and of color, we have experienced and seen just there's so much out there that's telling parents what to do and how to do it.
Right.
And in a context, as we contextualize this intersection under systems of oppression, that sort of our parents are saddled with, that and that, these messages come through different portals, different sites, right? The school system, the criminal justice system, other parents with internalized, oppression too, that gets, parents get judged for the different ways in which they choose to parent. And yes, there are some real constraints here that parents have to contend with and work with. But it's also, I think, was really important to us as a way to disrupt these as a way to connect deeply within, to sort of affirm to parents out there that deep within you, you have the wisdom, you have the solutions. And it is really something that we wanted to, we wanted to come in with also the perspective that when we focus only just on a single story and a single experience, that gets spoken for all. And I think we really wanted to, as a way to disrupt this too, to offer multiple ways of parenting and multiple stories from different angles and different, identities to present to our parents that there are so many different ways to choose to parent well. And it's so easy to succumb to that. Here's what to do. Here's 3 steps, and then your child will be golden. Right. And that is what we really wanted to walk away from. So we have approached it this way.
So let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and sort of dive deeper into some of the content that we're talking about. Hi, it's Elaine. And if you like this podcast, you'll love our coach approach. Whether you're a parent looking for support or a professional supporting families, we invite you to download a free guide with 12 key coaching tools at impactparents.com/gift. You can begin using a coach approach to help kids become more independent or improve all of your conversations at work and at home. That's impactparents.com/gift. So welcome back, everybody. My guests are Jaya and Priya, who are writing a book on parenting at the intersections, raising neurodivergent children of color. And what you were just speaking to was what I would call an invitation to parents, was really creating a book that's an invitation for parents to trust their knowledge, their instincts, to lean into their own cultures and find the path forward, rather than looking to the experts to say what are 3 things or 5 things or 10 tips, or but to really step out of those realms of judgment. One of the things I've experienced, and the work we've done at Impact, we've really, because it's a coaching framework and coaching is very an empowerment-based modality, it's all about inviting people to trust their instincts. So I think there's a lot of synchronicity in what you're talking about. And what we've seen is that there's something in particular in cultures of color, immigrant cultures, small town culture, like there are all these different communities where kind of every culture or community seems to think they might be a little bit more conservative. They might be a little bit more like there's this, we all on some level see ourselves as different from the other. And so we need to find our individual path within it. And then there's also this uniformity of experience. So I'm curious, as we look at this question of what do you want parents listening to this to understand most? Yeah. I want to lay that framework on it, because there's this way in which we have a commonality experience, all of us as parents of kids with neurodivergence. And then we each have our own cultures, whether it's people of color or other individual cultures. So what comes up?
Yeah, I mean, that's an important question, because I think just adding on also to just what Priya was sharing, right? I think the big thing that we really want parents to understand is that parenting is not happening in a vacuum, right? That we are shaped by these larger dominating systems of oppression that we live under.
Yeah.
And that while parenting our multiply marginalized children, we're also kind of working within and against these systems, right? And so part of the offering of this book is for, when we talk about things like white supremacy, capitalism, settler colonialism, they feel really big and amorphous, and they're like, what does that mean? Right. And I think the gift in this book is we really make it very concrete of the ways that it can show up in our lives, show up in our parenting, right? So that when we start to notice urgency, when we start to notice perfectionism or doubt, parents can start to make that connection of like, wait, this is something systemic, it's intergenerational, it's, it's not mine. There isn't something wrong with me, but I'm sort of carrying this sort of mandate of these systems, and really thinking about parenting then as a localized site where we as parents are enlisted to produce this ideal citizen, right? That can go out and work and contribute to capitalism. Yes. But then when we have these children who kind of, are not fitting the mold of quote unquote norm, and that the norm is actually determined and filtered through the prism of these systems of oppression, there's these feelings that come up for parents of like grief and loneliness and like,
isolation,
right? All of those things. And so first is that piece of like, let's really understand that this is happening in a context. Then let's put our feelings about how we're raising our kids and connect it to that context, right? And that there's a real offering that when we can hear other people's stories, right, when we can feel seen and validated and reflected, there is something that like releases in our bodies, right? I mean, just that sense of I don't have to hold this all alone.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
interesting, because I would say that in my community, if there is one uniform voice amongst all others, it's that voice of, for the first time, I don't feel alone.
Yeah.
For the first time, I feel seen, I feel understood. And that's as a parent of children with neurodiversity or neurodivergence, regardless of what their cultural framework is, there's that. And then I can imagine when you add other layers, right, it compounds that challenge and the need to feel seen.
Right. And that systems of supremacy actually impact all of us, but the impact is different based on where we're socially located, based on our identities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's giving voice to that.
Priya, what do you want to add? What's coming up for you?
I think the piece about sort of working within, there are these universal themes, and also I think individually and culturally, we spoke to so many parents that added their own sort of, brought to light the messages and that they had absorbed from their own families growing up. And that was very, there are flavors and there's differences in that, right? Like how difference is constructed and seen within cultures of color, and how perhaps over time that, that I'm losing my words, but the acceptance, or the not just acceptance that feels weak, but
embracing,
able to perhaps celebrate and embrace difference, that because of colonization or because of immigration and a lot of these factors, that difference suddenly has a really multiplied and heavy, cost and meaning to it. And so what does it mean to stand out and call myself a proud neurodivergent family when we have just, immigrated and we aren't seen as, as part of the community yet in a new context, right?
Yeah.
And so those fears are real, and those messages that we when we think about messages, some of them were definitely there was a lot of stigma that parents brought up, right? There's a lot of stigma to being to being able to seek support, and fear of
I was going to say, and fear, a lot of fear.
Fear of what will the authorities do if they see me as an incompetent parent, right? And all of these are real fears, and it's not, like Jaya said, I think it's really important that this context be named. And we had a parent who beautifully said, when we name the enemy, we can feel more powerful, and so it feels like we have some direction when we know where we are, and so that is really,
I'm really struck by what you just said, because I think most parents of neurodivergent kids worry about what will they say of me as a parent. But a lot of us, those of us who are either appearing white facing skin, whatever, depending on the culture, don't have to worry about what the authorities think.
That's right.
That word is really key. And we see underrepresentation in underserved communities. And as I hear you use that word, the cascading impact of that shows up loud and clear for me. Because it's hard enough to deal with it in our own families and our own communities. But then when you deal with it in that larger political construct,
I mean, we've had parents talk about it, like interacting with schools, right?
Yeah.
And where that real, school to prison pipeline starts, right?
Right.
Black moms talking about being read as the angry Black mother, right?
That's right.
When you're advocating for your child. Yeah. The Black father who told us about, right, like his daughter is getting mistreated and he's being told to calm down because he's being read as a dangerous Black man, right? And they have security outside the room as they're having a conversation, right? So these are the ways that sort of seeps up and makes it harder.
And the conversations the parents need to have with their kids in these contexts is also, when you've got a kid with impulsivity, that has a whole different meaning for a 15-year-old Black boy than it does for a 15-year-old, blonde curly-haired girl. It's going to have a different impact. We do need to start wrapping up the conversation. I want to ask one more question before we do, and that's, can you speak a little bit, because I'm guessing you talk about it in your work together, to the notion of sort of where that notion of model minority and how that plays into this larger conversation?
The model minority concept was, really, it's used as a political and a social wedge to create, to engender more anti-Blackness, right? The idea being, well, let's look at this group of people who, came here and look at them working hard and look at them being successful, and sort of pointing to the Black community and saying, why can't you be like that? So it creates a wedge, right? That's what supremacy does. It splits us all up.
That's right. The term, I just want to be clear, was introduced to me by an Asian friend, right? Initially.
And then the other piece of model minority, I think that's really harmful for our communities, is it strips us of our humanity, right? In that sense of, you are expected to be on point, be successful, not have any mental health challenges, do all the things, be the doctor, be the lawyer, right? There's no room for error.
Yeah.
And
better, stronger, faster. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you're always striving, and you're striving by putting others down.
Which adds to this compounded perfectionism that is particularly unhealthy when you have neurodivergence underneath.
I just want to add one thing, if I can go back to the other piece of what we want parents to know, is that I think the other thing is that because there's so much standardization around education in our medical system and all of that, what we consider the norm, right? What we consider like expected of children, we're relying on standards that don't actually fit. And so parents have to inhabit a role of being a map maker. And that's sort of how we talk about it. Like, we are actually charting a course here, and that that the models we're given don't fit, right? And I think that's also really important to name that there is something here to charting a course.
Yeah, indeed. So I like the metaphor a lot, because that notion of the GPS system, right? Sometimes it goes on the fritz, and we have to actually find our way without that map, somebody else's map, right?
That's where community is so useful.
Yeah. Priya, what do you want to add?
I think the model minority piece also is another layer to masking for neurodivergent kids, right? And parents as well. I think the whole, what we want from this book is for parents to read this and have, permission for themselves to navigate where spaces where they don't feel like they can be fully authentically themselves, and partly because neurodivergence is not accepted, but also because you have to uphold this model minority piece for those cultures of color that kind of which is it's not all cultures of color that fit that model minority standard in society, but I think that is an additional factor that prevents parents and children to be able to fully authentically be themselves in places. But we also make it clear that this is the reality of our situation and our context, and we're not advocating for masks to be dropped. And I think there's a reason why these masks, and there's a meaning, and there's something that these masks serve, right? And I think safety is a really important reason, and we trust that parents can and children can figure out, and parents can support kids to figure out where they feel safe to be themselves, so that those masks can be dropped, which is another piece why it's so important for parents to reflect on the model minority piece to be able to create that safety within the home for children to be themselves.
And that's, there's layers. It's safety within the home. And, the other thing I'm thinking about as I'm hearing both of you speak is that sometimes in our community, it's safety within our own home. And we do a lot of work around shifting expectations, not lowering them, but shifting them. Like, we have to understand the context of what's happening. And sometimes our families are looking for safety within their community or within their culture or within their, I was just reading a book somebody asked me to read that was about, a kid with gender differences coming out in a really observant religious community and becoming dissociated from the community in order to support the child.
Yeah.
So there are layers and layers and layers. We're dealing with it. First, we as parents have to come to terms ourselves, either with ourselves or our kids or both, and then with our family, and then with our community, and then with, it just keeps coming. So I really appreciate the invitation to explore the conversations with ourselves, which is really what I'm hearing both of you saying, is that this is inviting parents to have those difficult conversations with ourselves first,
right,
about all the different layers,
right? Yeah, and that's what in the book we really provide a lot of prompts, questions to go do that self-inquiry, to do somatic practices. So we put so much of this is just stored in our bodies, right? Our responses and our reactions.
Yeah, for sure.
And really coming, that Priya and I were very aware of the fact that we have a certain positionality, even as women of color with privilege and access to resources, that we're just here in this book as holding a container, right, for the multitude of stories, the multitude of experiences to emerge, and that we're not actually the ones giving voice to these experiences, right? So we want to be very careful about that as well.
Yeah, which is I love that language again. That's so why our framework is, as a coach approach, feels so in sync with what you're doing. Is because it's all about our journey is to be with them on their journey and to support people in exploring their journey. So I love that. Tell people how they can find out more about you each or together, or what do you want to share? All the links will be in the show notes, whatever they're about to say, but where do you want to direct people to?
We have a joint book, a website for the book. It's www.parentingattheintersections.com. And we have an Instagram page as well, and that's at Parenting at the Intersections with dots between every word.
We'll have it all in the show notes, so you can just go there. And the
book is available for pre-order right now.
That's what I was trying to say earlier. Thank you.
Yeah,
so I don't know exactly when this show will release, but I'm pretty sure it's coming out before the book is coming out. When's the book actually going to be released?
January 16th.
Yes, we'll have it out before then.
Yeah.
So, and we'll have a link in the show notes for everybody to be able to pre-order the book.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So before we wrap, is there anything you want to, any point you made that you want to hit home on, or anything we haven't had a chance to discuss that you want to make sure we bring into this conversation?
I think for me, I just want to really, say just, a lot of love and for parents out there who are doing this, and that they're reminding them they are enough. And also encouraging people who aren't parents or who don't have children of neurodivergent, children of color to read and to get curious about this experience, because I think we're all connected, right? We need to know our neighbors' stories, and that our children are, they're like there's a medicine that they're offering us if we're just willing to listen.
Beautiful. Priya, what about you? That's lovely. There's a medicine they're offering us if we're just willing to listen. That's beautiful, Jaya. Priya?
Yeah, I think maybe just coming back to what Jaya shared, this book is mainly for parents at the intersections, but I think there's so much here, so much wisdom that I think these stories offer to anybody working, living, and caring for children at these intersections. And I think as a professional, as a mental health therapist, I think it was really humbling to hear stories of professionals working with families who have invalidated their experiences. And I know all of us professionals, we come to this work with such goodness and such good intent to do well and to do no harm. But the fact is we are also impacted by these systems of oppression, and they do work through us. And it's so important to really listen to the voices that we're serving, and really be able to use any of the wisdom that we offer through the book and parents offer through this book, to take that in and to really reflect on your own sort of practice. And I think that was a really big takeaway for me as well as a professional. So
I love that.
Share that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and what jumps at me from what you're saying is that as important it is, and we talk to parents all the time about, seeking out providers who are well-informed about mental health or attention issues, executive function, ADHD, because not everyone is well educated in that arena. Similarly, it's really important to seek out providers who understand and have done their own work around this issue of intersectionality and community. Say it again.
Ongoing work.
It is ongoing work. They're a work in progress. We're a work in progress. We always come back in these conversations, don't we, to how important it is for we as parents to be doing our own deep work. Yeah. Like parenting calls us forward more than anything else to do our own deep work. And so thank you for creating a vessel, an invitation, a platform for us to do that. I think it's really important. I'm super excited to be able to support you in this.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. One more quick thing before we wrap. Do you have a favorite quote or motto that each of you would like to share with our listeners?
Sure. I think something that struck me, and we were talking about the expectations earlier, Elaine, I think I've been really sitting with, it's not a chalked out motto, but just sort of a mantra perhaps that, it's important to have reasonable expectations and maybe perhaps lower your expectations if that's what it needs to, that's what needs to happen. But that doesn't mean that you stop believing in your child. I think those are two separate concepts, and sometimes it can get really confusing. So I just want to say, let's all believe in our children and listen to them and their needs. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Seeing what's possible. I used to say to my kids, you're going to be an amazing adult. We just got to get you there.
Oh, I like
Right?
that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Jay, what about you?
In terms of a quote, I was actually, I think I feel very called to this. It's in my email signature.
Okay.
And just sort of not only with our children, but just globally what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And the quote is, there's no such thing as the voiceless. There are the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. And that's by Arundhati Roy.
We say it again. It's beautiful.
There is no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. Yeah, by Arundhati Roy. And something that I think a client taught me, and I'm trying to live into this more, is give the roses to the people in your life when they're still alive.
Beautiful.
That really is something that has been very meaningful for me to do.
I love that. It's beautiful. Thank you. I'm actually at this moment dealing with a loss in my family, so I really appreciate that greatly, and we'll take that to my family tonight. So thank you.
So sorry to hear that, Elaine. Yeah.
Thank you. It's good. It's okay. Thank you, Jay and Priya. Thank you for being here, sharing your wisdom, sharing the wisdom of all the parents you've spoken with and interviewed, and whose stories you've collected and are sharing. And thank you for the work you're doing. It's really important work, and it's timely, and you're really giving a voice to those who may be deliberately silenced or preferably unheard. And I really respect and admire and appreciate that. To those of you listening, to our listeners, take a moment and tune in for yourself. What's an insight that you're taking away from the conversation that you've just listened to us have with each other? What's your awareness? What's your insight? What's your aha? What do you want to take from this conversation, and how do you want to bring it forward with you into your week this week? We've had a fascinating conversation. What do you want to do with that and bring it, and how do you want to bring it into your life? And as always, those of you listening, whether you're parents, professionals, or some combination of the two, thank you for what you're doing for yourselves and for these amazing, complex children in the world. Your presence, your engagement, your thoughtfulness makes a huge difference. Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast. Behavior therapy training for parents is actually recommended as a first-line treatment for complex kids. For information about Sanity School, our training program for parents or teachers, which has helped thousands of families around the globe, visit impactparents.com/sanityschool.